Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and now that my two obligatory informative videos are done for the day, it's time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And I've had a couple subscribers ask me, hey Jason, could you check out Jeff Nippard's Skull Crusher video, which actually turned out to just be a tricep video in general, but I knew what they were talking about. I saw it in his feed, I went and watched it, and people wanted my opinion on it. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. There were good stuff and bad stuff in it. I don't really have a real beef with Jeff. He's not one of those people I really dislike. I've given him flack for certain things as far as I feel like his involvement with the supplement industry a little bit. I think that's shady. You guys know I'm anti-supplement. I think it's a con man industry. I think everyone involved is at least a little bit of a con man if you're involved in supplements. It just is what it is. But I don't necessarily dislike Jeff. I feel like he does put out more good information than bad information, which is better than we can say of most people in YouTube fitness. So I don't have a big issue with him. In fact, he and I came to some agreements before here in my video comments a few months back. So my thing is, here's what I would say with that. Jeff actually really does have really significant tricep development. Now, I'm not a bodybuilder. I'm going to remind you guys again, because that always comes up. People like, Jason, why do you say that all the time? Because every single video I make discussing anyone who is a bodybuilder, people come in and say, who are you to talk about? You don't look like a bodybuilder. And I'm glad I don't look like a bodybuilder. I don't want to look like a bodybuilder. I'm not a bodybuilder. I'm not a bodybuilding fan. I actually am morally opposed to the bodybuilding culture. Like, I actually see it as repugnant and degenerate. So let's get that out of the way. Let's get that out of the way up front. So, not a bodybuilder. But Jeff has pretty damn big triceps. He has pretty big triceps, and I don't think we can argue with that, right? So, give credit where credit is due. The dude's got jacked triceps. But here's what I'm going to say. I think he has jacked triceps for two reasons and two reasons only. I don't think it's because he focuses on the mind-muscle connection on his skull crushers. I think it's because he is strong as hell on the bench press. Dude's a legitimate strong bencher. Now, he's weak on his squat and other stuff. Dude's weak as hell on that. He needs to work on that. But his bench, he's straight up legit on his bench. Right? No doubt. Especially for his size and weight. His bench is impressive. Well, that has added a big chunk. That is the base of his tricep development right there. Now, the thing that I'd point out, the fact that he does long head training. He trains the long head of the tricep in addition to having like a 365 bench. I think that's, was he benching like 365 with a pause? I could be wrong, but I think that's about what it is. For a guy who's under 180 pounds, that's legit. I can't hate on that. You can't. Nobody can hate on that. And I know serious powerlifters going to hate on that. We can't. That's legit. And then he does focus on long head. Well, the long head is the one head that does get neglected a bit on the bench press. So when we're talking about that, and then we come over to this whole point of he's saying, well, you need to hit these different angles. No, you really don't, guys. You really don't. That's absurd. And keep in mind, I come from the perspective based upon my own understanding of all the scientific literature and my observations through life. Isolating a muscle doesn't cause it to grow any faster than a compound movement. Now, and I'm just stating that, I don't believe in trying to isolate muscles. I don't believe in single joint exercises. I believe that even isolation movements that people try to do are best done as a multi-joint exercise. And in a way, the skull crushers that he is showing do turn it into a multi-joint exercise. And now he's trying to minimize that. He is trying to minimize that, right? But you can't. You can't. Because once you start doing stuff that puts a stretch on the long head, when you're laying down doing a skull crusher, you are invariably going to get some shoulder extension. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Shoulder extension is a great thing when you're trying to recruit the long head of the tricep. Because let's be realistic here. That is the one head that is not only the biggest of the three head, it's the one head that gets the least work during all your chest presses. And we all bench. We all do weighted dips. We all do stuff like everyone does. Come on. We know those other two heads are getting worked. But what the whole point comes down to, I believe that if you're going to do a smaller exercise, it needs to address something that isn't being addressed with a bigger exercise. Otherwise, you would just do more compound movements. So let's be realistic here. If you think the lateral and medial head of your triceps need to be bigger, you need to spend more time on the bench press, more time weighted dips. Problem solved. You shouldn't ever need to try to focus on those. They get developed from those lifts. Long head. That's the one head that I'll say if you want really big triceps, if you were going to do a smaller exercise, a skull crusher that works the long head would probably be a good idea. And I would even recommend that over the behind the head stuff. People say, why? Because you can get more muscles involved. And that's where we're going to disagree. I believe that everyone's routine should have dead hang pull-ups and the standing press, right? I'm a big believer in those exercises. Those do work the long head of the tricep, right? They work the long head of the tricep. Is it enough to get all the development you want? Maybe, maybe not. It might not be, actually. So, skull crushers with shoulder extension involved, even I do those sometimes. You guys have seen me do them. Even for powerlifting purposes. Yeah, I think they're a good idea. If your long head of your triceps lagging, that could be a performance limiter for you. It might be a good idea to do that exercise. I've done it at different points. I think it's a good lift to do. Where we're going to disagree, I don't believe there's any benefit to trying to isolate a muscle. Now, he has the one study, and I know Dr. Brad has put it up. They've got one study showing more hypertrophy by trying to maintain limited range of motion on the tricep. Yet every single other study we look at, we find longer range of motion generally produces more hypertrophy. I am reluctant to say continual tension on the tricep based upon a single study when every other study we have showing range of motion is generally superior for hypertrophy. For all the muscles in the body, I'm going to be reluctant to accept that as real evidence that you should maintain constant tension. I'm just going to be reluctant to accept that. Let's just go back to just workload, right? You need to work the muscle. And I don't believe that turning it into more of a compound movement reduces load. It doesn't. If you are involving other muscles, let's say you are involving the lats and you are involving the chest because you turn it into more of a pullover, which is what he said you should be avoiding. You also can use more weight. All you're ended up doing, because again, if you're, say you're working with 100 pounds, right, that's what you're working with, or 95 pounds, you're working with 95 pounds on this exercise. If you're doing it strict, you're going to hit a certain number of reps with it. If you are turning it into more of a compound movement, you can't remove the long head of the tricep from the exercise. If you're going through the right bar path, you can't avoid using the long head of the tricep as a primary mover. Just because other muscles get involved doesn't mean that. It only means that if you do the exact same reps and sets with the same weight. But odds are if you can do 8 reps with 95 doing it really strict like that, you can probably do a lot more weight for 8 reps, or you can do a lot more than 8 reps if you do get a little bit of lat and chest involved by turning it into slightly more of a pullover. What's the loss? You haven't lost anything. And that's kind of the point. People can say, well, I do it this way really strict and I got results. Okay, but it wasn't because you did it really strict that you got results. It's because you recruited the muscle. Had you done it the other way, it doesn't mean that you didn't recruit the muscle, right? You don't know that you wouldn't have gained just as much muscle, if not more, the other way. And that's kind of the point people need to look at with that. Muscles understand being worked. They understand being worked. And generally speaking, when you turn an exercise more multi-joint, it produces better overload. It can be trained for longer periods of time before it stalls, and you can get a better training response and you can get a better motor unit learning response. I think for the long term, it's better to do that for a lift. That's how I feel about it. So I don't necessarily agree on that. From a programming perspective, no, you should try to turn everything as multi-joint as possible. That's why I tell guys, even if you're going to do curls and tricep extensions, you need to be looking at shoulder extension and movement involved with those, not just the elbow. Because there are certain muscles, certain heads of those muscles that do have a function involving movement of the shoulder. And you're increasing range of motion. So ultimately, it may be to your benefit to turn them a little more compound. Now, I'm not saying you should necessarily be swinging and cheating and all sorts of crazy stuff, but turning it into a multi-joint exercise may be beneficial to you, and it's not going to hurt your gains. And the other point we come to, again, he likes to cite Greg Nuckols. He likes to talk about stuff Greg Knuckles has done, and he talked about the mind-muscle connection. I'm sorry, but all the research that I've seen, even Greg discuss and present with the mind-muscle connection, what did they all find? They all found that external cueing produced even better results than internal cueing, meaning doing no cueing, just doing a lift, didn't produce as much results in terms of muscle activation as what the mind-muscle connection did, right? But what produced even better results than the mind-muscle connection? Compensatory acceleration. Compensatory acceleration. So therefore, moving the weight as quickly as possible while maintaining good form, focusing on bar speed, produced an even better EMG response and mind-muscle connection did on the exercises it was tested on. So I would suggest the mind-muscle connection is therefore an inferior training tool. I would suggest that maybe it might be in your best interest to do these the way a lot of strength athletes do them. Use a little bit of shoulder extension and explode up with it. You're going to get more overall muscle recruitment. You're going to cause more overall growth, which should always be our goal. I'm not a fan of someone saying, hey, I'm just trying to make just this muscle grow. If you're doing an exercise to make only one muscle grow, that's a waste of gym time. Now, should you be doing an exercise saying, I want as much growth as possible from it, but I want this area to get more of it? That's perfectly acceptable, right? Bring up your weak points. By all means, if you have a muscle that's being understimulated and that's what you need to do, by all means do so. But the idea of only trying to bring up a single muscle from an exercise is a complete waste of gym economy. It's absurd. You should be trying to get as big as possible all the time. Always be gaining muscle. However, there's going to be times when we pick exercises and phases of training where we do want more focus on one area, but we shouldn't be thinking in terms of isolating. That's silly bodybuilder bullshit. And that is going to make it harder and slower for people to efficiently get maximum jackitude. This is my humble opinion on it. I am not the all-knowing God of training by any means, but I have been in this game a very, very, very long time. I have my own opinions on it. That's just my opinion on it. That is an opinion. I just think it's wasteful. I think it's wasteful to do that when you could be getting other benefits. Now, where I will give credit to, though, is he is right. The focus on the long head, if you're going to go spend some extra time on your triceps, putting effort into the long head would be the best use of your gym time. I do totally agree there. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.